The idea that our actions are not fully determined by conscious deliberation, but are instead shaped by hidden forces within, represents one of the most radical shifts in the history of human self-understanding. At the heart of this revolution stands Sigmund Freud, whose conception of the unconscious mind laid the groundwork for psychoanalysis and continues to reverberate, directly or indirectly, through the halls of modern psychology, psychiatry, philosophy, and even the arts. While many of Freud's original ideas have been revised, challenged, or reinterpreted, the core insight that unconscious processes influence thought, emotion, and behavior remains one of the most profound contributions to our understanding of the human condition. Freud's model of the mind was not merely a theoretical abstraction, it was an attempt to explain the puzzles and pathologies he encountered in clinical practice. Observing patients who suffered from symptoms with no apparent organic cause, paralyses, phobias, compulsions, Freud came to suspect that these symptoms were not meaningless, but encoded messages from the unconscious. He proposed a dynamic model of the mind in which unconscious desires, particularly those related to sexuality and aggression, are repressed due to social taboos, only to resurface in disguised forms such as dreams, slips of the tongue, neurotic symptoms, or artistic creation. The unconscious, in Freud's view, was not a passive storehouse of forgotten memories, but an active, striving part of the psyche, in perpetual conflict with conscious norms and societal expectations. Freud, 1915. Central to Freud's architecture of the mind is the tripartite model consisting of the id, ego, and superego. The id operates according to the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification of instinctual drives. The ego, governed by the reality principle, mediates between the ID and the constraints of the external world. The superego embodies internalized moral standards and ideals, often inherited from parental and cultural authority. These three agencies are not separate entities, but functional aspects of a complex psyche, constantly negotiating the demands of impulse, reality, and morality. In this model, much of human behavior results not from rational planning, but from the compromise formations between these competing forces, many of which remain inaccessible to conscious awareness. Although psychoanalysis was initially met with skepticism, Freud's clinical innovations, such as free association, dream interpretation, and transference analysis, offered a novel and deeply introspective method for exploring the hidden layers of the self. Over time, Freud's theory was expanded by followers such as Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and later, object relations theorists and the proponents of ego psychology. Yet, even as psychoanalysis diversified, Freud's foundational claim about the unconscious endured. It became a guiding principle not only for psychotherapy, but also for cultural critique, literary theory, and philosophical reflection. In the second half of the 20th century, behaviorism rose to dominance in psychological science, dismissing the unconscious as unverifiable and irrelevant. Yet this dismissal would not last. With the advent of cognitive psychology and the emergence of cognitive neuroscience, the notion of unconscious processes experienced a scientific renaissance, albeit in a very different form from the Freudian model. Today, modern psychology recognizes a wide range of unconscious phenomena that operate beneath the threshold of awareness. Implicit memory, automatic processing, subliminal perception, and procedural learning, among others. One of the most empirically supported areas is implicit bias. Individuals can hold unconscious associations regarding race, gender, age, or other social categories that influence judgment and behavior without their conscious intent. Tools such as the implicit association test, Greenwald et al., 1998, have demonstrated that these biases are widespread, measurable, and consequential, affecting everything from hiring decisions to medical care. While not rooted in repressed desires, these unconscious structures share with Freud's unconscious the feature of operating outside of awareness and shaping real-world outcomes. Similarly, the dual process theories of cognition, popularized by researchers such as Daniel Kahneman, distinguished between fast, intuitive, automatic processing, System 1, and slow, deliberate, reflective reasoning, System 2. Many everyday decisions are influenced by heuristics and emotional cues that bypass conscious scrutiny, reflecting a modern echo of Freud's claim that much of the mind's activity lies beneath the surface. Kahneman, 2011. Although the terminology has changed, the insight remains. Consciousness is only the tip of the iceberg. In neuroscience, studies using functional imaging have identified distinct neural correlates of unconscious processing. For instance, stimuli presented below the level of conscious detection can still activate regions such as the amygdala, indicating emotional evaluation without awareness. In patients with blind sight, damage to the visual cortex leads to loss of conscious sight, yet individuals can still respond to visual stimuli they do not consciously perceive. These findings lend empirical weight to the idea that the brain can process information in meaningful ways without conscious involvement. Though modern neuroscientists avoid the anthropomorphic metaphors of a repressed unconscious, preferring to speak of non-conscious computation or implicit processes. Nevertheless, what Freud introduced was not only a theory of mind, but a way of listening to human suffering. He invited a mode of inquiry that treated symptoms not as meaningless errors, but as meaningful expressions of inner conflict. In this regard, his legacy lives on most clearly in the psychodynamic therapies that continue to explore the role of unconscious motivation, early attachment, and internalized relational patterns in shaping the present self. Contemporary psychodynamic approaches integrate findings from developmental psychology, attachment theory, and affective neuroscience, yet retain the Freudian conviction that insight into unconscious dynamics can lead to psychological transformation. From a broader cultural perspective, Freud's legacy has shaped how we speak about ourselves. The language of repression, projection, denial, and resistance has permeated everyday discourse, giving people tools to articulate psychological complexity. Freud helped forge the modern idea of the self as a layered, conflicted, and evolving construct, one that cannot be reduced to behavior, cognition, or neurobiology alone. At the same time, Freud's ideas must be critically evaluated. Many of his specific claims, such as the Oedipus complex, penis envy, or universal infantile sexuality, have been challenged on empirical, cultural, and ethical grounds. Feminist psychologists, in particular, have critiqued the androcentric biases in his theories. Moreover, Freud's methods lacked the empirical rigor demanded by contemporary science. His case studies were often anecdotal, his interpretations subjective, and his conceptual system resistant to falsification. Yet to dismiss Freud on these grounds is to overlook the generative power of his ideas. They opened up a new way of thinking about the mind, one that continues to inspire dialogue and revision. Reflecting on Freud's legacy in modern psychology raises fundamental questions. To what extent are we free agents if our choices are shaped by unconscious motives? Can therapeutic insight into unconscious patterns truly lead to change, or are these insights merely narrative constructions? What is the boundary between scientific explanation and existential interpretation in the study of the mind? In conclusion, Freud's theory of the unconscious inaugurated a psychological revolution whose reverberations are still felt today. While much of the terminology and theoretical scaffolding has changed, the central intuition that beneath our awareness lie forces that shape our feelings, thoughts, and actions remains indispensable. Modern psychology, in integrating unconscious processes into its cognitive, social, and neurobiological models, continues to engage, sometimes explicitly, sometimes unconsciously, with the Freudian vision. In doing so, it affirms that understanding the human psyche requires not only measurement and modeling, but also depth, narrative, and reflection.